The time I almost broke my neck. At McCullough School in the 5th grade, we were in gym class learning how to wrestle. The instructor paired us up with wrestling partners. The boy that I got had just lost his father 2 weeks before this. He was mad at everything and everybody. Before we wrestled, he got up in my face and said, "Deckard, I'm going to break your neck." Well, I didn't want him to break anything of mine, especially my neck. How would that look? Me walking around with my head tilted over to one side, resting on my shoulder. So rather than anger him any further, I went limp and let him throw me down and pin my shoulders to the mat. We were finished in about 5 seconds. He never had bothered me before or since then. I never had to hang my head in shame for throwing the match. In fact, I was delighted that I could hold my head up straight. Feathers. Near Bloomington was a camp called Bradford Woods. Every 5th grade class spent a long weekend there learning all about nature and art and hiking the great out of doors and using a compass. My favorite activity was a pillow fight in my cabin supervised by our counselor with very strict rules. 2 boys had to face off within a large circle marked on the floor. We used the pillows that we had brought from home. They were all feather-filled. The rules were simple. Try to knock your opponent down, and he gave us about 60 seconds to do that. The fights began, 2 at a time. There were cheers and jeers from the bystanders. A pillow broke and feathers flew everywhere. Then another, and another. My turn came around. The guy I was fighting was popular, and I wasn't. So I heard some rude remarks sent in my direction. "Knock him down, Rod. He'll be easy." I called for my brick-chopping muscles to help, mentally, and took one swing at Rod with my pillow, catching him behind his knees. A look of astonishment appeared on his face as he collapsed onto the feather-covered floor, and a hush fell over the crowd. My pillow was not broken. Playing hard. In the winter, we played outside in the snow, sledding and building snow forts. We stayed out and played until we couldn't feel our feet, and then came in and stood close to the coal stove in the living room until the feeling came back to our toes, and then outside again. The best place for sledding was next to the Indiana University baseball field. There was a nice long hill, roomy enough for all the neighbor kids. One time we stopped long enough for a snowball fight, and that turned into throwing a snowball at passing cars. And then along came a city bus, and one kid threw a snowball at the bus and it hit the windshield. The driver brought it to a stop and got out and came after us. I thought we'd all go to jail. I was ready to rat out the boy who did it so we wouldn't all be incarcerated. But then the bus driver stopped short, stooped over to scoop up some snowball material, and threw some at us. Close call. Sometimes playing hard could be very stressful. In the summer, we played hard up until bedtime, after a brief intermission for supper. We played games outside until we were drenched with sweaty dirt. Southern Indiana is hot and humid in the summer. But never mind, we would get our Saturday night bath. in a few days. We played hide and seek, kick the can, freeze tag, regular tag, and if it was dark enough, we would run from cars, hiding on the porch from their headlights as though each car was after us. It wasn't all about running and jumping, though. We put on a classic play in our living room called The Prince and the Pauper. I was forced to wear my sister's leotards for my part. It was humiliating. Mom, who was the very definition of patience, let us turn the place upside down to create a stage and scene for our play. It was a blockbuster, as a few kids from our block performed for a small audience from our block, and financially, by the way, we went bust. Not everything was plain. We also worked hard, like when our heavily laden cherry tree came crashing down in an overnight storm. We all joined forces to pick every last cherry off that tree. Mom got to work canning all the cherries. Hard work, but we reaped the benefits for a long time. Cherry pie, cherry cobbler, hand-cracked cherry ice cream. Precious memories. Neil Garrels was my best friend. We had a lot of action, drama, and romance in our playtime. For the romance part, we would introduce our wives to each other, extolling their beautiful features, and we'd say things like, "Wow, your wife sure is beautiful." My wife was Spanish and had dark brown hair and dark brown eyes. Little did I know that my real wife, as of 1973, was all of the above, except she was an American. Neil and I took turns being the strongest man in the world. We'd prove that by grabbing the yoke of Dad's utility trailer and lifting its front end a few inches off the ground, to which the other would say, "Wow, you sure are strong." And then we'd switch off being the fastest man in the world. This was proved by running all the way around the house as fast as we could, to which the other would be obligated to say, "Wow, you sure are fast." Thank you for joining me today for one of my adventures. Please tune in again next time for number 20 in the series. God bless you.